Hey everyone, Brian Zane here with another classic pay-per-view review as nominated by my Patreon backers. By the time this video comes out, we'll just be days away from WrestleMania 35 in the shadow of New York City because we don't dare mention the state New Jersey. For some reason that's boogeyman, can't say that. However, people seem to like WrestleManias that end in 0s and 5s. Those are very strong, solid numbers, so I figured this week we'll look back at another classic WrestleMania with one of those numbers at the end. It's WrestleMania 20 from March 14th, 2004 at Madison Square Garden, which was the site of WrestleManias 1 and 10. The big tagline here, of course, is where it all begins again. However, if WrestleMania 10 was also in Madison Square Garden, wouldn't this be the show called Where It All Begins Again? Anyway, this show was nominated by a few people. There's Edward Przybylski, Antoine Daniels, Jeremy Russell, Stephen Azzopardi, and Flagger Guy 23, all on patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. 18,500 people in Madison Square Garden. The show earned a $2.4 million gate and 885,000 pay-per-view buys. This, of course, was, as far as we know, the final WrestleMania in Madison Square Garden. They've never looked back to doing manias in standard, basketball-sized arenas ever since, I think, WrestleMania 23 when they were in Detroit in Ford Field. Ever since then, they've exclusively been doing like the football stadiums, which is nice. I'd like to see them go back to, WrestleMania at some point in the future, maybe 40 or 50 if it goes that far, at Madison Square Garden, kind of like revisiting the old place. But it would feel weirdly intimate. It would be such a weird step back to go from like massive arenas to back to, Madison Square Garden. Even though all the history is there, of course, you can't, it's hard to step backwards in wrestling, and so it'd be hard for them to go from these huge arenas, these football-sized stadiums for WrestleManias, to suddenly cut your attendance by like 1/3 and go to Madison Square Garden again. But it'd be nice just for a historical standpoint. Speaking of Madison Square Garden, the different sets are here again. You've got the LED sign facing the hard camera the entire time, and I just love the set here for Mania 20. It's all LED boards in kind of like a cityscape. I don't think they take full advantage of it. There's a few times where I go, yes, it's exactly what I want to see. Like when Kane comes out, for example, all the buildings are on fire and stuff, and sometimes they'll just get rid of the buildings and you'll see a full screen graphics and stuff. But for the most part, you just see kind of like pop-up windows showing up for like the Titantron entrance videos for wrestlers. I don't think that's not the best use of the technology, but I still appreciate the set they have. Also a big fan of the LED flooring, which I believe was the first time we saw that for WrestleMania or for WWE in general, was to have that LED floor, which really added a whole other dimension of visuals and presentation for the show, which I think is great. Your English-speaking announced teams for this show are JR and the King for Raw, Michael Cole and Taz for SmackDown. The show opens with a performance of America the Beautiful by the Boyz Choir of Harlem. Very stirring rendition of the song. One thing I noticed was, having just watched WrestleMania 10 for the last review, is that there's some parallels between this performance and the one Little Richard did for Mania 10 in the same building, in that when they're singing it cuts to the stock footage of American visuals. The one from Mania 10 is very flowery, very Americana, like here's the flag, here's some flowing fields and mountains and all that stuff, and it's very nice. And then with the one from Mania 20, it's a lot of very pro-military, pro-troop stuff, because we're in the thick of that current Iraq war at that point. It's about a year or so, maybe a year and a week or two after the initial deployment from the troops, which they alluded to in Mania 19 as well in the commentary. So this is very, pro-military and all that stuff. Then the video ends with a shot of the New York skyline with a kind of, I guess, a concept design of One World Trade Center, the Freedom Tower. It doesn't quite look like that today, but it's close enough. We then go to a great high package that shows the previous 19 years of history of WrestleMania, how it began with Vince McMahon's vision, and then at the end it ends with a shot of Vince, and he's standing next to Shane and his baby boy. Oh, 3 generations of McMahon boys. That was darling. The show begins with the match for the U.S. Championship as the Big Show defends against John Cena. Now, Big Show won the belt back in October at No Mercy against Eddie Guerrero. He's held the belt since then. And when he comes out with the belt over his shoulder, it just looked like a toy on him. Now, I don't mean that in the sense that it looks kind of cartoony compared to how the other belts looked at that time. I just mean the size of it. It looks like it's so tiny on him, like it's one of those action figure belts, on like a larger action figure or something. Meanwhile, Cena is like red hot this time. He's basically, his rapper gimmick has evolved from the heel stuff to being more babyface oriented. He's so popular right now. The rocket has clearly been strapped onto him, and you can just tell from this moment he is destined destined for greater things. Of course, last year he didn't actually work Mania proper. He was on Sunday Night Heat before WrestleMania, rapping to those cardboard cutouts of Jay-Z and Fabulous. Seen him with a rap before the match begins. He says that him losing tonight is like Gary Coleman beating Patrick Ewing in a tip-off. Of course, they are at Madison Square Garden where the Knicks play, so a nice little throwback to a Knicks legend there. He then says he's going to beat the Big Show like a penis with an STD. Well, there you go. The match starts off with Cena showing no fear, going right for Big Show with some punches. Show catches him mid-cross body and starts working him over. We get some Let's Go Cena chants, and they're not immediately followed by Cena sucks chants. So that was a trip to go back and listen to. Cena tries to make a comeback, eats a big boot. The crowd is very much into everything Cena does. Cena makes a big fiery comeback, hits the FU on the Big Show, and then to follow that up, we get a kick out. So we get kind of like a 1-2 punch of emotions because, Cena at that point had never picked the Big Show up before. It's the first of what would be many times he'd end up putting the Big Show on his shoulders, but that was the first one, and I'm glad they saved it for Mania because that was such a cool moment. The crowd was super into it. For Show to kick out makes Show look really tough as well. So the match keeps going on. A frustrated Cena grabs his big chain necklace. The referee tries to stop him. Cena throws the necklace to the other corner. Referee goes to grab it, and while he's doing that, Cena grabs one of his Word Life US custom brass knuckles that he wore at his entrance. He clocks Big Show in the head with it, hits him with another FU for good measure. Cena wins the match. He's the new US champion. It's his first singles title in the company, and of course it would be far from his last at that point, but him opening the show here, big fight feel, big opening rap, beats the Big Show in this very impressive way, and he wins his first championship. It really does kind of like it's kind of a stamp of approval or coronation for Cena as the next big thing. No allusion to Brock Lesnar intended there. I give this match 2.5 stars. I think it was a solid opener with a very memorable finish. I do think it was very interesting how Show looked so tough in defeat, taking not one, but 2 FUs and also a brass knuckles shot. So, he didn't look like he was a chump per se. Cena had to really be scrappy and resourceful in order to beat him. And of course, Cena would go on to have a very lengthy run with the US Championship for the bulk of 2004. I think he might have lost it like for a couple of weeks to Carlito, and then it was a kayfabe stabbed by Jesus off screen or something. But then he would regain it pretty quickly. He got the spinner US title, and that was a very interesting looking custom belt. But yeah, this was the beginning of the run for John Cena as we knew it. Backstage, Jonathan Coachman says hi to Dr. Tom Pritchard and Johnny the Bull and Teddy Long. He goes into GM Eric Bischoff's office, and Bischoff is flanked by Johnny Nitro, who at that point was like an assistant to the GM or something. This is like his first kind of gimmick he had when he was on the main roster. Eric tells Coach to find the Undertaker for reasons. It's never explained, and it's never really followed up on again what Bischoff wants the Undertaker, but we'll see more of the adventures of Coach a little later on. We then go to an Evolution promo narrated by Randy Orton, the Intercontinental Champion. They are standing in the same stairwell that Orton kicked Mick Foley down back in June the previous year, and the whole promo is just Orton doing all this exposition and talking about how he's made Foley's life a living hell since last year. He'll say something, they'll cut to a clip, they'll go back and they're in a different place, like they do a different camera angle, which I thought was pretty cool. And so Orton says, it will all begin again here tonight in that handicap match coming up. A very well done promo. Randy comes off like a total prick here, being flanked by Ric Flair and Batista. He's just so smarmy and everything. I think it's one of the stronger promos Randy Orton did around this time. We then get our first of 2 tag team title fatal 4-way matches on the night. Real bang up job by the creative team here. First, the Raw titles, the World Tag Team Championships, as Booker T and Rob Van Dam defend against La Resistance. That's Rene Dupree and Rob Conway. Mark Jindrak and Garrison, formerly Lance Cade, and the Dudley Boys. Booker T and Rob Van Dam with the worst hybrid theme ever. We've heard some bad hybrid themes over the years when like unlikely pairings come together. This one's got to be the worst. It's just like the beat to Booker T's track from WWE Originals, Can You Dig It? And then you just hear like, what of a kind, like spliced in there, just crammed in there.
Yeah, that's it, man. Can you dig it? That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Anyway, Booker and RVD won the belts the previous month by beating Ric Flair and Batista for them. They're defending them here tonight. Booker starts out strong against La Resistance and Bubba Ray, but he eventually gets worked over. Booker with a spine buster to get out of the mess, tags in RVD. The Dudleys go for a 3D, but Jindrak stops it from happening. It's still, a flapjack, still devastating, but not 3D devastating. Booker kicks very low on Rob Conway, pretty much a low blow, hits the axe kick. RVD follows up with a 5-star splash, and he and Booker retain retain. That's pretty much all that really happened of note in this matchup. I give it 1 star out of 4. Not a terribly great match for 4 teams involved. Booker T and La Resistance were pretty much like doing the bulk of the work in this matchup. Dudley Boyz did like a little bit, RVD did some stuff, and Jindrak and Cade were almost a non-factor. You could have taken or left their contributions and it wouldn't have made a difference. They were pretty much there to just like fill out the ring and make an even number of teams and even number of guys in the matchup. Also, all can be for naught with Booker and RVD retaining, because 1 week later, they would drop the belts back to Flair and Batista. Backstage, the coach hears some freakish noises. He looks into like a loading dock. He sees Bobby Heenan and Gene Okerlund. They got lipstick marks all over their face. They're making out with Mae Young and Moolah back there, like a couple of high school kids. It was just great seeing Heenan and Okerlund together again. I think it's the last time you'd see them on screen together. And Heenan had just gotten inducted to the Hall of Fame the previous night. So it was really cool to see him, and just great comedic timing by them. We're playing cards. Yeah, we're playing poker. And then Mae and Moolah pull them back in, and Heenan's like, I don't want to go back in. I don't want to go. As he's saying he doesn't want to go back in, he's like closing the door behind him, kind of, so they can have privacy. It was great stuff. It was a really funny moment. Chris Jericho versus Christian up next in a grudge match. This all started last year when Jericho and Christian, former tag champs, former best buds, placed a bet, $1 Canadian, over which of them would get to sleep with Trish or Lita first. That whole thing dissolved, eventually led to a Battle of the Sexes tag team match on pay-per-view. But over time, Jericho began to have feelings for Trish Stratus, and he was there. The whole thing was, we're just friends. But Jericho wants more than that. Meanwhile, Christian is trying to drive a wedge between them and stir the pot. He's like the best friend who's feeling kind of like left out, being kind of the third wheel with Jericho's pining for Trish Stratus. Christian at one point is forced into a match with Trish by Eric Bischoff, but twist of twists, big old heel move here where Christian kicks out, beats the hell out of Trish, and puts her in the walls of Jericho and lays her out for a couple of weeks. And man, to me, this angle was like one of my favorites of the year. I think it was because like at the time I was like, this kind of like hopeless romantic, and I did have a bit of a crush on Trish Stratus at the time, and so I was like, you go get her, Chris, show her that true love conquers all and everything. So I thought that was kind of a sweet storyline. Tim White is your referee for this matchup. It would be the last match he refereed, because in the middle of it he would end up re-injuring his shoulder doing a count. He hurt his shoulder 2 years before that in the Hell in a Cell match between Jericho and Triple H at Judgment Day. I think this was like one of his first, if not his first match back refereeing, and this was it for him. That was like the end after getting himself hurt again. Early on, Christian's back dropped out of the ring. I love the height he gets on that too. Big triangle cross body to the outside. Christian with a cutoff starts working over Jericho's head and neck. Jericho with a comeback. He goes, come on, CLB. I'm like, remember when they try to get that over? CLB, the creepy little bastard. Like, man, just rolls off the tongue, does CLB. We get a lion salt attempt. Christian puts the knees up. We get a reverse tornado DDT. Not often you see that one. There's a kick out. Superplex attempt, but Christian drops Jericho. Christian with the Texas Cloverleaf, countered into the walls, but there's a rope break. We get a double underhook suplex leading to a double down. Trish Stratus appears. She comes running down to the ring in very pointy, thin-looking heels. All I could think of was when I was like looking at her, I was like, man, I'm surprised she doesn't roll her ankle or break a toe or something in those shoes. She gets in the ring. Christian grabs her by the hair, slams her down. Jericho makes Christian powder out. Jericho checks on Trish, and Trish, not seeing who's behind her, elbows him right in the mush, and in the distraction of the chaos, Christian rolls up Jericho, grabs some tights, and wins in kind of an upset here. And so there's this moment where, Trish and Chris are consoling each other. Christian gets back on the apron, and that's the cue. That's the Pavlovian thing. Now it is time to unleash the evil plot. Trish slaps Jericho across the face twice, unprettier by Christian, and Jericho's laid out, and Trish and Christian stand atop of him. They go back to the stage. They make out a little bit, like after Christian like grabs her by the hair. Ooh, she likes it rough. And like Jerry, I think it was Jerry who says like, oh, she's smitten with Christian, haha. I give this one 3 stars out of 4. Easily the best match of the night so far. It would get better, but this was a very nice match to see here. I just love the story, not only in the match, but in the build as well. The work they were doing, the mix of technical and the high flying stuff was great to see. And the ending, the shock ending there was also very captivating. And of course, Christian and Trish would have an on-air storyline, like romantic relationship for a while. The following month at Backlash, Jericho would actually beat the two of them in a handicap match. And also along this time, we'd see the debut of Tyson Tomko as Christian's muscle, the problem solver. Backstage, Mick Foley's being interviewed, and he's asked if he feels emotional about his first match back in 4 years since his retirement at the hands of Triple H. Suddenly out comes The Rock, and he says, finally, The Rock's come back to New York City, and Mick Foley has come back home. And then The Rock pretty much does what The Rock does usually. He's just basically riffing. It's jazz, baby. He's going around the backstage area. He's calling out people. He calls Hurricane and Rosie, Hamburglar and the Grimace. He calls out Snuka and Morocco having a chat. He opens the side door to see all the people in the crowd. Very electric promo, very excitable promo, and The Rock is just jazzed to be there. We then go to our handicap match for the evening as Evolution. Orton, Flair, and Batista take on the Rock and Sock Connection, reunited, and it feels so good. So basically, after months of being beat up and embarrassed and humiliated by Randy Orton and Evolution, Foley calls upon his good old friend The Rock to come back from Hollywood for a spell and help him out here. Very rare look for The Rock in this match, by the way. He's all kind of thinned out. He's not like jacked at this point, and he's got like the goatee. It's a very weird, rare look for him. You don't really see him rocking this look ever again. The match starts out with a brawl. Rock and Rick start off. Flair's backdropped on the outside, which does not look fun. Foley with a cactus elbow immediately following that. We get some in-ring work between The Rock and Orton. It's the closest we ever get to like a proper one-on-one match with The Rock and Orton. And that, I think, is a match that I wish we could have seen. Just kind of like, especially at that time, you know, The Rock as the established veteran, the megastar off to Hollywood, coming up against another third-generation guy. I think you could even do a match like that today, and it would still be interesting if you built it right. But I think it was so much more interesting back then when all the comparisons between Orton and The Rock were there, and they had very similar arcs in their beginnings as well. So I think that's a match that I wish we could have seen, but I don't think that's ever really going to happen. We also get some stuff between The Rock and Batista, two guys who would go on to become megastars in Hollywood, of course. Flair chops The Rock in the corner. The Rock is selling his ass off for those chops. Foley comes in like a house of fire after a hot tag, but Batista takes him down. It gets worked over by Evolution. The Rock with a hot tag of his own. He beats up Flair, Orton, and Batista. Great moment here when Rock throws Orton out of the ring, and Orton sells terrific as he goes out of the ring, lands, and hits his face on the apron. It goes boing as he hits the thing. Flair goes for his own people's elbow, and of course The Rock kips up from that, hits him, spine on the pine, people's elbow with the strut. Flair kicks out of the people's elbow, which I thought was weird because the people's elbow is kind of like, that was the exclamation point in the match. That was always like the finish, and for Flair to kick out was very interesting. Rock bottom on Orton, Batista with the Batista bomb as Flair distracts the referee. A kick out, Foley with a hot tag like the third or fourth in the match. Foley hits Orton with a double arm DDT. He gets out the sock, but Orton recovers in time, hits him with the RKO out of nowhere to win the match. So Evolution is a mystery, but it does win the day. I give it 2.5 stars. It was an entertaining match. I think it would have been better, however, if they cut it down by like 5 to 8 minutes. By the end, it was getting like really long in the tooth, and I think they kind of like maxed out the possible heat they could have got with this thing, especially when you know where the Foley-Orton match is going to go. And so I think, yeah, it just went a little too long. I was starting to go like, okay, let's wrap it up. It's getting kind of, you know. And so anyway, yeah, Foley gets a standing ovation from the MSG crowd after losing. This feud would continue on into Backlash, though, because Foley would bring back Cactus Jack, take on Randy Orton in a hardcore match, and that was, of course, the moment. I think that Orton really earned his stripes as a competitor because he took this big, he went for an RKO, and Jack blocks it, so Orton just takes a big open flat back bump on the thumbtacks, which looks so gnarly. And so that was kind of like a real defining moment for Orton at that point in his career. And Foley putting him over not just at WrestleMania, but also the following month at Backlash in the hardcore match was really cool. We get a recap of the Hall of Fame with a presentation on stage of the inductees. This is the first Hall of Fame class the company had in 8 years. It went on a big hiatus after 1996, but of course, ever since bringing it back at WrestleMania 20, it has never gone away. They've been inducting people into the Hall of Fame every year thereafter. You know, you can usually find some kind of common thread with a lot of these Hall of Fame classes over the years. This one to me is like guys who made it big in Madison Square Garden, like just before or like in the early days of the Hulk Hogan era. It's a huge class too, 10 people in all. There's Jesse Ventura, Greg Valentine, Bobby Heenan, Sergeant Slaughter, Don Morocco, Harley Race, Junkyard Dog, Big John Studd, Billy Graham, Tito Santana, and the first first ever celebrity inductee into the Hall of Fame, Pete Rose, baseball's hit king. I love Gene Okerlund introducing him here, saying he'll be in another Hall of Fame someday. Probably not at this rate. But he also gets booed by the crowd too, which that was hilarious. So, Pete Rose, he has, his history being involved in Manias 14, 15, and 2000, aka 16, always getting beat up by Kane. So yeah, I think him being the first celebrity inductee was rather fitting. And by the way, boy, they have really stripped down the Hall of Fame recaps in WrestleMania since then, haven't they? This one is like super long compared to what they do now, where it's just like they say their name, they wave, and they do it in a row, and that's it. Gene Okerlund has a whole little bio for everybody here, and so it just goes really long. But yeah, they've definitely mastered the timing of the Hall of Fame recap in more recent years. Then it's time for the first ever Playboy evening gown match. Gird your loins, gentlemen, as Sable and Torrie Wilson from SmackDown take on Stacy Keibler and Miss Jackie from Raw. Yes, this is an interpromotional matchup too, so bonus points. The story here is that Sable and Torrie Wilson recently showed up as the co-cover girls of the latest Playboy magazine. Stacy and Miss Jackie are jelly about it, and so we have this match. It's supposed to be an evening gown match, but Sable initiates taking her gown off before the match begins. Everyone follows suit except for Miss Jackie, who they strip her of the gown as the match begins. Torrie with the top rope cross body, biggest move of the whole match. Then we follow up with a series of roll-ups and counter roll-ups between her and Stacy. Where are they getting this stuff from? Taz and Cole are just giddy. They are beside themselves trying to do commentary here. It's kind of distracting, but at the same time, I think I'll take their, kind of like tittering and their nervous laughter over and everything over, like, say, Jerry Lawler. You'll see why I mean that. You'll see what I mean by that a little later in the night. Jack Doan gets steamrolled by the ladies as well. That's a classic Divas era spot. Torrie counters a Jackie roll-up with one of her own, wins the match. I give this one a half star because you know what? It wasn't terrible. Actually, the half star is more for Torrie specifically because of the two good moves she does in this entire thing. So yeah, Sable, by the way, is undefeated at WrestleMania now. She won at 14, 15, and here at WrestleMania 20. So she is the female equivalent of the Undertaker around this time. She has the Mania streak. After this show, Sable and Torrie would break up. Sable would turn heel on Torrie Wilson. That would lead into their match at Great American Bash, which I would like to not revisit. Thank you very much. Backstage, Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero with some very natural blocking. Win or lose, Eddie says that he'll be proud of Chris, but Benoit says there is no lose. He gets all fired up and mad at Eddie for saying that, but Eddie's like, I'm just messing with you, ese vato. I'm trying to get you pumped up. And so, that trickster Eddie. Up next, Chavo Guerrero defends his Cruiserweight Championship in the first ever Cruiserweight Open. It's essentially a gauntlet match, but instead of guys coming out one at a time when somebody's beat, they're all surrounding the ring at once. They just run right in as soon as their turn comes up. Chavo gets the champion's advantage. He will be in last, 10th of 10. And so the entrances happen. Ultimo Dragon comes out, and he famously slips and falls on his entrance here, but they don't show that angle. They show this very wide angle, so you can't quite tell what's going on, but they covered up pretty well on the network. And so Ultimo and Shannon Moore, the former Mattitude follower, are the first two in the ring. The action's very fast to start. Charles Robinson's actually kicked on accident in the process. Ultimo eliminates Moore with his flipping reverse DDT. Not quite a Salida del Sol like Kalisto does. Jamie Noble's up next. Noble catches Ultimo with a neck breaker, puts the guillotine on Dragon, and he taps. So Ultimo Dragon's one and only WrestleMania at Madison Square Garden ends on kind of a down note. Noble rolls up Funaki in seconds. Nunzio's up next. We get a Let's Go Guido chant, which is nice, kind of like a call back to his days as Little Guido in ECW. Nunzio eats shit on the outside, and he is counted out. Kidman comes in next. Nunzio and Noble are still fighting on the outside. Kidman was a springboard shooting star onto them on the floor, but it's a scary landing because he collides head first with Nunzio's head. It's a very scary landing. He could have really hurt himself there. Kidman is a guy who's known for his shooting star press, but he's also known for a lot of bad shooting star presses as well. This one I just think was just unfortunate timing. Kidman eliminates Noble with the BK bomb. In comes Rey Mysterio, who starts out hot. His attire this WrestleMania is inspired by The Flash. He eliminates Kidman with a code red off the top. Tajiri is in next. He goes to the Green Mist, but he hits Akio instead, his running buddy. Rey eliminates Tajiri. Akio should be next, but he's unable to compete because he's blinded. Tajiri kicks Rey in the dome, and we're down to Rey and Chavo, the champion. Chavo, by the way, is accompanied by his father, Chavo Sr., aka Chavo Classic, but Chavo Classic gets involved. He gets his when Ray jumps on him on the outside. Ray goes for a sunset flip. Chavo sits on him and gets help from Classic. Chavo retains. I give this one 1.5 stars. This was just, I think, a match that needed more time. Like the handicap match with Evolution and Rock and Sock, if they took like 5 or 6 minutes from that match and gave it to the Cruiserweight Open, I think it would have been a much better turn of events for both of them. This match needed more time. Everyone got maybe like one spot in, if they were lucky. Sorry, Funaki. And then that was pretty much it. I think this match could really benefited from a lot more time. It was just too quick for me to really enjoy it. Are you ready, folks? Because it's time for Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg! At the Royal Rumble, Brock Lesnar screwed Goldberg out of the Royal Rumble matchup. Goldberg got his revenge the following month at No Way Out. Steve Austin gave him a ticket to the front row. Goldberg jumps the barricade and costs Lesnar his title against Eddie Guerrero. And so Brock demands a match with Goldberg after Eddie Guerrero stole his title. And then Austin is named the guest referee for this, so it's a nice tie-in from when Austin helps Goldberg screw Lesnar. And really at that point, once Austin's named the guest referee, who is the sheriff of Raw, by the way, worth pointing that out. Once Austin's thrown in the mix here, the build is almost exclusively Lesnar-Austin, and Goldberg is like the third wheel in this. And that is one of the biggest problems from this from the beginning. But, I guess it was to be expected because, hey, Goldberg's on his way out. Of course we're going to, take the emphasis off him. But then what happens less than 2 weeks before WrestleMania, Lesnar gives his notice because the grind and the politics of wrestling have become too much for him. He just bought a private jet so he could travel easier. Now he's got a jet sitting in his driveway he's not going to use because he's taking time off from wrestling to pursue football. And that left the company a bit of an odd pickle of a predicament. With wrestling being the way it was, the internet being what it was, everyone knew about this going into the match. And so the crowd immediately pounces on this, not just for Goldberg, but for Lesnar. As the match begins, we get some you sold out chants, which is really confusing because if you look at it, Lesnar is walking away from a contract extension where he's making more money. So he's walking away from that. Goldberg's letting his deal expire. Who exactly is selling out here? Because neither man is really benefiting financially from leaving at this point. It's a very, very long time between when the bell rings and when they finally lock up for the first time. It's supposed to be this kind of big, tense, dramatic moment here, but the crowd doesn't give a shit. It's a lame duck match. So they're chanting, hey, hey, goodbye. They're chanting Austin. My favorite part of this is, they're both kind of flexing and they're both kind of sizing each other up and just grunting and stuff. Lesnar with this one grunt he makes, but it's so quiet, it evaporates the second it leaves his lips. It's bleh.
I am seething.
We get lock up, shove, lock up, shove. That's the bulk of the action for the first couple of minutes, really. And people have told me that to enjoy this match better, you have to tune out the crowd, to ignore them, or you have to put the thing on mute. I disagree because this thing was just boring from the beginning. Like I said, it's not like the build was any good. It's not like we had some big, dramatic, epic story we had to see the conclusion of going into this. The build was primarily Lesnar versus Austin, and Austin wasn't wrestling. So even if the audience didn't have the knowledge beforehand that Lesnar and Goldberg were both on their way out in this lame duck match, they would have shit on it anyway. If not from the beginning, they would have done it a couple minutes in with this terrible opening display. We get some "this match sucks" chants. Goldberg finally makes things interesting with a military press into a slam. A spear attempt, Goldberg misses. They fight outside. We get some Goldberg sucks chants. Lesnar with a very long head and arm hold here. And to JR, everything is a modified something. It's either a modified slam or in this case a modified headlock. Everything's modified. Nothing is the original form. Everything's just a modified version of some basic thing. I think we get a Hogan chant too at one point. It's a night of weird chants in this matchup. Goldberg finally gets out. The crowd is hating this thing. Spear, kick out, F5, kick out. The crowd is begging for death. They want this match to end as soon as humanly possible. Lesnar goes for a corner attack but misses. Another spear, a jackhammer. Goldberg wins. Fuck this match. 0 stars. Now, people will tell me that Taker Gonzalez WrestleMania 9 is the worst WrestleMania match. And yeah, that match is bad. But did anyone expect anything good from those two, especially slow plotting El Friggin' Gigante against The Undertaker, against a gimmick that's supposed to be slow and plotting as well? No, I maintain this is the absolute worst WrestleMania match of all time when you look at on paper what Goldberg and Lesnar are. Even if you don't think they're the best workers in the world, there's still something there about them and their character and their in-ring presence that makes them an attraction. There's still things they do in the ring that get you to go, hey, that's some impressive shit. And so when you've got that happening here on paper and you get the concept down and then the execution is this slow, plodding. Like, not, you can't even call it methodical. It's just slow and boring match. Yeah, like, it's a terrible match given the circumstances. Austin being there as a referee adds nothing to this because, you know, except for the fact they were building him and Lesnar, he did nothing in the match to really affect the finish. How could we have guessed that 13 years after this, Goldberg and Lesnar would have one of the more entertaining matches at WrestleMania 33 because they played to Goldberg's strengths. The first run he had in the company, they didn't play to his strength. They made his matches all generally long, and he's not good for the long game as Goldberg. So they played to his strengths in the later years and made him just do minute squashes, and that's all it took because that's what Goldberg was good at. So they finally realized it in the later years at WrestleMania 33 and so on. Here he was sunk because the match was supposed to be long. Lesnar can work a long match, but he's not a ring general at this point, and neither is Goldberg. So I guess Austin was there because he had the most experience, and maybe he was guiding them. Who really knows? But oh man, this match is so friggin' bad. And like I said, for what it could have been and for what it ended up being, yeah, that's why to me it's the worst WrestleMania match of all time. Afterward, Brock gives Austin the double deuce, and Austin hits him with a stunner. See you in about 8 years, kid. He then hits Goldberg after they share some beers. Honestly, if this 60, 90 seconds here was all we saw of the interaction between Austin, Lesnar, and Goldberg, if we didn't have a match and we just had this thing, that would have been far more a better use of their time and their abilities than what we saw in that matchup. This whole thing was a waste of every man's talent in that ring. God almighty, that match, the longer it went, the more sleepy I got, and I can't tell you how much I hated this matchup. They announced next year's WrestleMania is going to take place at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Vince McMahon shows up, thanks the fans. Then we go to our second Tag Team Championship Fatal 4-Way of the night as Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty defend the WWE Tag titles, the SmackDown version, against the World's Greatest Tag Team, the Basham Brothers, and the APA. Bradshaw is in his very primordial JBL here because he's got the JBL haircut. He's cut off the black hair and the mustache and everything, but he's not in the suit and the white cowboy hat just yet. And we start off with Bradshaw and Benjamin in here. There is some history between these two teams because a couple weeks beforehand, World's Greatest Tag Team did like a parody of the APA in the ring. It was pretty hysterical.
No, they don't remind me nothing to me. Damn! Damnity, damn!
Scotty's wearing his motocross pants. I never really thought about it until watching it for this review, but I'm like, how Bush League was it for Scotty 2 Hotty to wear these just like generic motocross pants in his gimmick? Because he went from like the Jinko jeans basically with Too Cool to doing this. Like, unless you're sponsored by this company, why not get like custom made motocross pants like with your name on it instead of the company that this is for? It's like, it just seems really indie to me. Great sell by Benjamin after he gets the hip thrust by Rikishi. Bradshaw with a big follow-by slam onto one of the Bashams to the outside onto Benjamin and Haas. Rikishi with a big sit on Danny Basham, and Rikishi wins. Again, I wish I could tell you more about this match, but that was pretty much the only things of note in this matchup here. I give it 1 star out of 4 of the 2 tag title matches tonight. This one I think was the weaker of the 2. Not half-star weak, but it was certainly not anything beyond a 1 star. This was just, again, this is stuck in my craw ever since WrestleMania 20 with, hey, can we not have better storylines for these tag team title matches and you gotta have this lazy copy and paste? Same recipe, different ingredients with the Raw and the SmackDown tag titles as 4 teams. Like, give them storylines, give them something to do. Newly minted Hall of Famer Jesse Ventura shows up for a ringside interview with Donald Trump, who is sitting in the front row. Now, what I'm about to say is not meant to be a dig on him. Trump fans, hold your hate for a second. I'm just gonna say he shows very early signs here of being a great politician because he fails to answer a simple question that Jesse asks: what does WrestleMania in New York mean to you? Because he just goes, oh yeah, Vince McMahon's great, I'm great, my son's here, he's great. It's a perfect politician answer where he doesn't really answer the question. Jesse then asks Donald if he were to go back into politics, Jesse that is, would Donald give him moral and financial support? Donald says absolutely, and Jesse goes, maybe we need a wrestler in the White House in 2008. Well, you were close. You got a Hall of Famer in the White House in 2016, so close enough. Women's title on the line here as Victoria defends against Molly Holly, and the big caveat here is if Molly loses, she gets her head shaved bald right there on the spot. Now, Molly and Victoria are having a perfectly fine match in the ring here, but Jerry Lawler cannot shut up about shaved women and panties and, oh, do you think she shaves down there, JR? And poor JR, he cannot escape the quicksand that is gross Jerry Lawler commentary, so he's dragged down with him and has to engage him in this line of discussion while the match is going on. A great sunset flip powerbomb out of the corner by Molly as this match goes on. Molly goes for Victoria's Widow's Peak, but Victoria counters out of it with a backslide. Victoria wins. I'm going to give this one 1.5 stars. It's, the commentary notwithstanding, this match was okay. I was surprised at the finish being as kind of sudden as it was, but then again, you kind of have to have Molly not be knocked out by a finisher just to have what happens next for it to happen. So Molly tries to run away. Victoria catches her, but Molly she decks Victoria, tries to shave her head, but the clippers are not working. Victoria fights back, and so then she knocks out Molly, straps her into the barber's chair with like Hot Topic belts. The shaving commences, and there you go. Molly Holly is getting shaved bald. Very clean cuts here. It has to be a very cathartic feeling. It's kind of like taking like all the piece of tape off of something in one go. It's all the hair just falls off in one stroke. Beautiful. Famously, this is the match that Molly Holly had to pitch to creative and volunteered herself to have her head shaved in order for the women's title to be represented at WrestleMania. Can you imagine that kind of the culture of the company back then, that they had to like beg and Molly had to sacrifice her hair to get this match even booked? Can you imagine that today happening? Like, it's so absurd to imagine a show, or especially WrestleMania, where there isn't like a women's match or like a women's title match happening. That's insane now to think that this is what it was like 15 years ago. It's crazy how much the company's changed since then. WWE Championship match up next as Eddie Guerrero defends against Kurt Angle. Now, no way out, the same night that Eddie Guerrero won the championship from Brock Lesnar, Angle beat Big Show and Cena in a triple threat match to become the #1 contender. Angle and Guerrero at this point, they were friends, they were allies, but then Angle was a guest referee for a match between Eddie and Chavo. Angle turns on Eddie, and that begins this whole very devious, sadistic heel turn for Kurt here. Basically, he says he doesn't want Eddie to be the champion because Eddie is a recovering drug addict, and that a drug addict should never be champion. Oh, it's ironic. It's damn ironic. And so Angle and Paul Heyman, who is the general manager at this time of SmackDown, are basically working together on a weekly basis to embarrass and humiliate and beat down Eddie Guerrero. It's a very deeply personal build here for this matchup. It's a great story they're telling. As Kurt makes his entrance, Molly Holly still getting her head shaved on the stage, and Kurt walks by and sees her. Do you think that when he saw what was going on, he looked and thought, I've been there, sister? Match starts off with a lot of mat wrestling, lots of chains. Eddie, the whole story here early on is Eddie keeps trying to quicken the pace, make it his pace of match, but Kurt keeps slowing it down, is much more methodical, and so Eddie's got to find little opportunities, slivers of opportunity to get some offense in. Eddie goes for a dive to the outside, but misses, and so he lands right on his chest and sternum area on the barricade. Angle working the midsection, doing some suplexes. Eddie comes back on the corner, goes for a frog splash, but he misses. Angle with some big punches. Eddie gets fired up in the process. Eddie counters a German with a roll-up. There's a kick out and a clothesline. Angle begins working the ankle here. He goes from the midsection to the leg and ankle area of Eddie, but every time he puts the ankle lock on, it's not in it for very long before Eddie is able to escape it. Eddie goes up to the top rope, but Kurt catches him, suplexes him off. More ankle lock time. Eddie makes a comeback with a DDT, frog splash, and a very long 2 count before Kurt kicks out. That was like inches away. Another ankle lock. Eddie launches Kurt out of the ring, starts untying his boot because he feels it looks to be that his ankle is really hurting. He's trying to alleviate the pressure by taking his boot off. Kurt gets up, sees what Eddie is doing, that he's selling the leg so much. Eddie with a very visible, oh shit! And so Kurt gets in the ring, he smells blood, goes to the ankle lock one more time, but the boot comes off, and in Kurt's confusion, Eddie catches him in a roll-up and just happens to instinctively hook the bottom rope with his ankle while he's pinning Kurt, which had to be improvised. There's no way he thought of that beforehand, and he wins the match. Eddie lies, cheats, and steals his way to a title victory, and Angle is furious, and yeah, this is an amazing match. 4 stars. It is one of my favorite Mania matches. R. Felix Finch has told me on several occasions it is his favorite WrestleMania match of all time. And for me, this is one of the top ones for sure. This is easily one of Kurt and Eddie's best matches, either against each other or just individually. Fantastic match here. I love the story. I love the build. the athleticism and the great clash of styles between the technical and the mat wrestling and the technical and the lucha libre, the high flying stuff. It worked so well here. This is easily one of the best matches of the night. My one little nitpick though, and this is not going to affect anything, but it's just something I noticed when I watched it more recently, is that Eddie's getting his ankle worked, okay? Like, he's not like dead. He's not dying by the end. He definitely exaggerates the pain by the end when Kurt falls for his trap, but he's still in the ankle lock for a few times. His ankle should be hurting a little bit, but when Eddie's making his way back up the ramp, he's not selling the ankle at all. I'm like, come on, Eddie, you're a professional. But again, that's like a super small nitpick. That's like, I don't think anyone else noticed that but me, but that's kind of one thing I thought. But yeah, it was an amazing match. After this, Angle would take some more time off because he re-injured his neck in the process. He would spend some time as the SmackDown general manager where he waged wars with people from hither and yon and stuff. And so yeah, that was pretty much, this was the end of their in-ring confrontations, their big ones at least. This is their biggest match in the feud by far. In your semi-main event, Kane takes on a big spooky cross, aka The Undertaker. Now, back at Survivor Series the previous year, Kane helped Mr. McMahon beat Biker Taker in a Buried Alive match. So we had not seen Taker for months leading up to this show. And so Kane delivers a eulogy for his brother, and he says the reason he did what he did was because Taker had betrayed who he was and became one of you being the audience. Oh, you're a normie or something. So then at the Royal Rumble, Kane was distracted by big spooky imagery and sound effects, something that would carry on for weeks leading up to WrestleMania, and Kane was keep getting spooked every time, saying, I buried you alive, you're not real. And so we now have this match here at WrestleMania, a rematch from WrestleMania 14 in fact, and I love how they kept Taker super mysterious and ambiguous here, where it's like you never saw him before his match at Mania, didn't see any promos from him or nothing, all you just saw was the sound effects and the spooky imagery, and like I said, he's represented on the matchup screen by the big tombstone, the big cross, and so they keep it really ambiguous. I think that led to a lot of fans speculating on what he's going to look like when he came back and everything. So Kane makes his entrance, city on fire, yes, love it. Then all of a sudden you hear, oh yes, the big Paul Bearer voice reverberating through the arena. Paul Bearer making his way out for the first time in like 2 years. He signed a contract with him the previous year, and as a bonus, the company paid for his gastric bypass surgery, so he was a lot more svelte than the last time you saw him. Very interesting. I do vividly remember the moments around this show happening because on his website, he used to have a website where he had like a blog basically, and he was telling everyone up and down who would listen that no, I'm not going to be at WrestleMania, I'm not part of it, I'm glad that, Taker, whatever. He basically was washing his hands of it, denying coming down he was going to be there. And sure enough, when he does show up, people were pissed at him and people were emailing him like, why'd you lie to us? Da, 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 da. And he's like, I'm trying to fucking keep kayfabe. What's the matter with you people? He got mad that people were like mad at him for trying to mislead him because he was just trying to maintain the illusion that it was going to be a surprise. Anyway, Bearer then introduces The Undertaker with the Druids and everything. The music plays, the crowd is electrified. Taker makes his way out. It's the first time you've seen him in months. His hair is getting long. It's not shoulder length yet, but it's getting there. He's got a big old black cowboy hat and a trench coat. I think people were disappointed in how Taker looked in this match too. I remember some of the online chatter from fans at this time, and they were like, oh, Taker looks like, man, he's the biker with a head. It's like, I don't know what people were expecting. I don't know if they were expecting Super Shredder to come out, but I was not disappointed necessarily when I saw Taker come out. I was like, oh, okay, he's got the leather pants still and the singlet. Okay, whatever, but it's, he's the Undertaker again. He's, big evil and all that stuff. So I didn't have a problem with it, but I do remember people being pissed about Taker coming out, the way he looked. And Kane was great there. He's shook the entire time. He's like, I buried you. You're not real. You're dead. And so the match begins. Taker with the early advantage. He's supposed to get dropped onto the ropes like a snake eyes thing, but they're not quite close enough, and Taker's got to practically dislocates his shoulders trying to grab the rope on the way down. Taker with the old school. Kane hits a choke slam. Taker sits up and comes back. Taker with a clothesline. I love how Kane jumps up to meet him in midair. We get a tombstone. Taker wins. Was there any doubt what was going to happen here? I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars out of 4. Now, as a spectacle, the moment of Taker and Paul Bearer coming back, Taker for the first time since Survivor Series under the dead man gimmick once again. He's no longer the biker. Coming back in this way is such a huge moment, and it was just so cool to see him back with Paul Bearer. Can't wait for him to murder him at Great American Bash, the Concrete Crypt. As a match itself, though, it was like okay. I don't think it could live up to the hype of, Taker Kane Part 1 at WrestleMania 14, for example, but this was just an awesome moment of Taker's big return. Also, a side note, we never saw Jonathan Coachman after he saw Bobby Heenan and Gene Okerlund. He was still looking for The Undertaker at that point, so maybe he did find Taker, and that's why we didn't see him the rest of the night. Ooh. In your main event, Triple H defends the World Heavyweight Championship against Shawn Michaels and Chris Benoit in a triple threat. So here's how we got here. Back in the Royal Rumble match in January, Benoit won the Rumble match. He was number 1. He went all the way and won the thing after the world's slowest DDT onto the Big Show. It's something, of course, they can't mention anymore on commentary, but they're still going to bring up, only a couple of people have won the Royal Rumble at number 1. Shawn Michaels is one of them, and that's all you need to know. And so, why would they keep bringing that up if they have to keep dancing around Benoit? Anyway, Benoit wins the Rumble match. Shawn Michaels at the same show, Shawn and Triple H have a last man standing match for the championship. It ends in a draw. Very, very bloody affair they had. And so Shawn's business with Triple H is still not done. He wants a piece of Triple H still at WrestleMania. So when Benoit's getting ready to sign his contract, Shawn hits him with Sweet Chin Music, signs the contract for himself. So there's a bit of dispute here. Shawn and Benoit are having a match to determine who will actually face Triple H for the championship. Triple H beats them both up. And as we all know, when you're the champion and you want to beat up both guys to eliminate their both threats, you end up fighting both of them in a triple threat match. That's just the way the world works. Now, I know it's been talked about before, and I think it's worth talking about again. I don't want to call Shawn a flat-out hypocrite for being involved in this triple threat match, because maybe it wasn't his call to be involved in this match at WrestleMania 20. But I do know the story goes that at WrestleMania 15, he talked Vince McMahon out of booking a triple threat for the title between Austin, Rock, and Mankind. And so for him to basically, because, it's got to be a one-on-one for the title at WrestleMania. And of course, that rule got broke the next year with a four-way. But now we've got this triple threat match here involving Shawn Michaels, the guy who got in Austin's ear and told him to make it a one-on-one thing. So, what a tangled web we weave. I do have to give Triple H credit, though, for this match. His white boots are very much on point. Things begin hot between all three. Benoit and Triple H on the outside. HBK moonsaults onto both of them. Benoit and Triple H work each other for a bit. Benoit's put in the Tree of Woe for a very long time, and Triple H and HBK work each other in the meantime. Benoit with some Germans onto Triple H. Benoit gets the crossface locked in for the first time. Triple H does get out of it pretty quickly, though, but that moment that he first gets it locked in, the crowd just explodes. Like, they want this to happen so badly. They're chomping at the bit. So that first spot right there with the crossface attempt is all you need to know about that. German suplexes on a Michaels, followed by a diving headbutt and a kick out. Triple H and HBK work each other some more. A flying elbow drop, Sweet Chin Music, but Benoit pulls Triple H out of the ring. Michaels is slingshotted into the corner and starts gushing blood. It is one of the biggest blade jobs I've seen. You can hear an audible gasp in the crowd from when they first noticed that Shawn is bleeding, because it is graphic. Benoit with the crossface on Michaels. Not quite as big a pop as it was on Triple H, because that's the one everyone wants to see lose, but Triple H makes the save. Shawn's dead for a minute. Triple H and Benoit make their way to the announce tables. Shawn and Triple H double suplex Benoit through the SmackDown announce table. He's out for a minute. HBK just looks disgusting here. Talk about an overachiever when it comes to bleeding, because he's gushing. It's gumming up his hair. It's super gross. Triple H is bleeding now after getting rammed into the corner post. There's a pedigree in the ring, but Triple H can't capitalize. Pinfall attempt, but Benoit just out of nowhere makes a save and breaks up the pinfall. Benoit with a sharpshooter on Triple H, but before he can tap Shawn with a Sweet Chin Music to Benoit, we get a kick out there. Shawn goes to the kick one more time, but Benoit dumps him out. Pedigree attempt by Triple H, but Benoit catches him, puts it in the crossface. The crowd is just, oh my God, they want this so bad. Triple H rolls out of it. You think it's broken, but Benoit holds onto it. Crowd explodes again. Triple H is fighting, finally taps out, and right then and there is possibly the most cathartic ending to a WrestleMania main event you will ever see, until they replicate the exact same thing 10 years later with Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 30, but I give this one 4 stars out of 4. This is a classic match. It's an awesome triple threat match I could watch again and again, and like I mentioned, one of the most satisfying endings to a match ever, because Chris Benoit finally did it. He finally overcame all the obstacles in his career and won the big one, and then you've got that moment, the tearjerker, where he he and best friend Eddie Guerrero hug in the ring. They're both champions. The confetti's fallen. They're celebrating. And what an incredible moment that is. Even if you ignore, ignoring the hindsight of what we know now, years later, about Benoit and everything, this is still an incredible moment for them and for their fans, because these are two guys who represented, they were like the poster children for the smaller workhorses who were overlooked because of their size, but they still could provide so much in the ring, and they never really got their chance. Like, these two guys in particular were held down in WCW for their size, and so they come here in WWE and they just kill it, and they become champions, their respective brands. It's like one of the most satisfying things, if you're a fan of these guys, you will ever see. And it's a perfect way to end on like one of the biggest manias of all time, on like your 5s and O's, for it to end on the 20th WrestleMania in Madison Square Garden with this moment here. Nothing's going to top that. My final grade for WrestleMania 20 is a solid B. For a show with as much good stuff on it, there's also a lot of flat out bad stuff on it as well. From the two copy and paste, equally uninspiring and uninteresting tag title 4-way matches, to the piss break of a women's tag team match, and for that matter, the women's match between Molly and Victoria wasn't that interesting either, except for the ending when Molly gets her head shaved. Very disappointing Cruiserweight Open, could have potentially be a lot better than it was, and that just god-awful, miserable, horrific, not enough adjectives to describe how shitty that Goldberg-Lesnar match was. You can't convince me otherwise that it's the worst Mania match of all time. But the good stuff is great. There's the hot opener with Cena and Big Show for the US title. Jericho and Christian's a great match. And then pretty much the final 3 matches on the show, you've got, Taker Kane, Eddie Angle, the triple threat match for the World Championship. Like, that's all amazing stuff. So that's why I came to the B grade, because, there's enough bad stuff to really weigh it down, but the good of the stuff is so good, I can't give it anything like lower than a B. Well, thanks for watching my review of WrestleMania 20. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks so much to all of you who nominated it for me as well. If you want to play a role in determining which shows I look at, be they good, bad, or somewhere in between, go to patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret, become a $10 backer or above, and you'll have the chance to nominate classic pay-per-views for me to review in the future. Unfortunately, the next classic review is not coming until the end of April, the last Thursday of the month, because I got a big project happening. It's taking the bulk of April, and it's going to go from pretty much after Mania until the last full week of the month. But that next Thursday, after the project is over with, I'm going to look at one more WrestleMania. This one's been requested an awful lot by one person for a very long time, and I really wanted to make sure that I got this under my belt before moving on to the next pay-per-views. It's WrestleMania 26. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.